So going over the whole lesson plan, when I initially looked at this template, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to make odds or ends meet with this. It just seemed like it would be simple because of how it appears as a form. But then as we delve deeper into the examples provided by Ginsberg and the 3SB experts as they came in and showed how they approached it, it showed that there's like a lot more to it than originally meets the eye. And while it does seem like a big, daunting task, it's also reassuring to realize that the more we do it, the easier it will become to go about it. So, starting off with the central focus, after doing our first lesson plan for the reading, I found that um, in order for me to progress, I had to like crank out the central focus first. And like right here, it's just kind of like you're explaining like the content that you'll be teaching in your lessons and basically like explaining what you want to achieve. And in this example, if we look at the content focus, they're talking about how students will be able to demonstrate their poetry journals for this unit. And also talking about for the first poem, students will have the options to either write their own poem using literary devices. And if you look at the very beginning, like the essential literacy strategy focus, students will learn how to annotate, analyze, and compose their own poetry. So it just really helps you like lay out what your goal for the lesson is, which is really helpful as you progress through the rest of it, as you go through like the standards, instructional learning objectives, and assessing. Like it really helps you like to understand how you can approach like each of these things and what you'll be including in the lesson plan. And so as we go down into the standards, like here you're basically addressing like the common cores that are being taught in the lesson. And like a good little strategy I learned about this is that it's okay to cross out portions of a standard that you're not going to be attending to. And so that makes it really helpful to not fret over finding the perfect standard to fit exactly into your lesson plan, but just realize that when you are addressing these standards to only include that which you're having in the lesson plan. And then as we move on to the instructional objectives and assessments, for the objectives, it's basically like what will the students be doing after the lesson. And so um, here in this example, we see how students will identify literary devices used in the poem, and students will be able to explain how she uses the literary devices, and students will create their own poem using the same literary devices. So like as the students progress through this lesson, they'll come to learn like which literary devices are in the play or in the poem, and so like being able to identify that is a crucial skill, as well as being able to explain how they're used, and then of course being able to use them themselves. And then as we look at assessments, it's just basically the way that we like see like where our students are at, whether it's like a formal or informal style. And so it's really handy for the teacher to understand how they will be able to assess their students throughout the lesson plan, because you need to know like where your students' level of understanding is in order to like provide them guidance where they're needed, or to just give them more responsibility over the lesson like when it's not needed. And as we go to the language function and additional language demands, we basically just see like what will we having the students like focusing on. So in this example, we see that students will identify and they'll be able to analyze. And so we know that as we're developing our lesson plan, we want to focus on these two important skills for them. And so for the additional language demands, we also want to understand what is the necessary vocabulary for our students to be able to understand and not be met with frustration as they progress through the lesson plan. And moving on to the resources and materials is pretty straightforward. It's basically everything that you're going to be needing in order to carry out this lesson plan effectively in your classroom. And as we approach the student prior knowledge, I believe that this is like a very important part for the lesson plan, because especially in all the readings, like the importance of background knowledge is so essential. And like even from my own personal experience, like when you're approaching a new concept, the more you know about even like the slightest connections to that topic is very helpful for you. Not just like for your understanding, but also just for your comfortability as you like approach a new concept. You know, many times when we're faced with a new challenge, we become frustrated as we like struggle to like learn all the new like intricacies to this. But the more understanding that we have of what knowledge our students are bringing to the table, the better we're able to assess like the level of guidance that we may need to provide them, or the level of lost my train of thought. But yeah, so basically the importance of background knowledge is really helpful. And so like in this sample, we see how they bring up the last lesson and what the students learned there, and how they're able to complete literary devices slides to study the various literary devices that can be used in poetry. So it's clear that the students do have an understanding of what literary devices are, and so now it's just the teacher's task of getting them to understand more. And so they listened to, read, and annotated the poem, so they are familiar with the poem, which is very good. The more that we have students, the more that students are familiar with the text content, the better they'll be able to understand and delve deeper into its meaning. So going forth, the hook for the purpose for learning is really important. Just not just for like the teacher and like their enthusiasm for the lesson, but also of course for the students and how much engagement we expect to get. And like the more powerful the hook, the more powerful like the purpose we give them, the better. Just to like see like how it's applicable for them in their everyday life. You know, we always get the age-old question of why are we learning this? We're never going to use it. And so being able to deliver that to our students is it's a very like powerful way to like ensure that this lesson will stick with them and be productive for both the teacher and the student. And so in the focus instruction modeling, we kind of just talk about like basically like how we're going to be like approaching, like is the teacher going to be talking, are the students going to be going through discussions, or will they just be listening? And going for the differentiating and scaffolds, we just basically are seeing like how we can address like students with IEPs or 504s, basically like what our lesson plan is going to be like, and how we can modify it for students that may need further assistance. And that goes more into the guided instruction practice. And so like how you provide student opportunities to practice what you taught. And so a lot of this will be like a lot of group discussions, which are very helpful. Or if they're, and for example, in this example, they're using poetry journals, which is a very strong tool to help students develop their own thoughts and also just practice their skills with writing and develop that as well. Yeah, and so independent practice, what are we giving the students so that they're able to take this home? Like, are we giving them the proper skills and techniques so that they're able to do this without guidance is very important to develop them as independent learners. And yeah.